Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back into a world that feels both familiar and impossibly distant. A world of freshly mowed lawns, unlocked front doors, and neighbours who knew your name not because they looked you up online, but because they borrowed your hedge clippers last Tuesday. We're talking about 1950s suburban America, specifically the small, quiet rhythms of neighbourhood life that somehow held entire communities together. Before we dive in, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been suggesting topics lately. You really do shape what we explore here, and I'm grateful for that. If you're enjoying these late-night journeys through history, go ahead and hit that like button, maybe subscribe if you haven't already, but only if this feels like your kind of corner of the internet. And hey, we're now live on Spotify too, so if you want to listen there, there's a link in the description. No pressure, just options. Now go ahead and get comfortable, dim the lights if you can. Maybe switch on a fan for that soft white noise, settle into your blanket, wiggle down a little deeper and let the day fall away. Because tonight, we're not just talking about the past, we're slipping into it. Think about it for a moment. What did a Tuesday morning actually feel like in 1955? What sounds drifted through the neighbourhood before 7 a.m? What did the hardware store smell like when you walked in? How did families spend their Sunday afternoons when there were only 3 channels on television and nobody had heard of a smartphone? What did kids actually do all day in the summer? And what was it about those neighbourhoods, those tree-lined streets with identical houses and tidy lawns, that made people feel like they belonged to something? Could you survive a single week in that world? Could you handle the slower pace, the lack of privacy, the unspoken rules about lawn care and curtain choices? Could you live in a place where everybody knew your business, but also brought you casseroles when you were sick? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1954. The coffee is already percolating on the stove. Someone down the street is mowing their lawn before breakfast. The milkman just left 2 glass bottles on your front step, and the day, quiet and unhurried, is just beginning. Let's start with the morning, because mornings in the 1950s began differently than yours do now. There was no alarm buzzing from a smartphone, no scroll through notifications before your feet hit the floor. Instead, you woke to the soft clink of glass bottles being set gently on your front porch. The milkman had already been by, moving quietly through the neighbourhood in the pre-dawn stillness, delivering fresh milk in bottles so cold they left rings of condensation on the wood. He knew your family. He knew how many quarts you needed each week, whether you preferred whole milk or skim, and if your household was the kind that bought extra cream on Saturdays for homemade ice cream. He wasn't just a delivery driver. He was woven into the fabric of your street, a steady, reliable presence who showed up whether it was snowing, raining, or blazing with summer heat. You step outside in your robe, barefoot, the concrete cool beneath your feet. The bottles sit in their wire carrier, beaded with moisture, the cream already risen to the top in a thick golden layer. You lift them carefully, feeling their weight, their coldness seeping into your palms. The cardboard caps press gently into the glass necks, and you know that when you peel them back inside, the cream will be so thick you could almost spread it like butter. Your milkman's name is Ed, or maybe Frank, and you've known him for years. He started this route before your children were born, and now he asks about them by name when he sees you out front. He knows your daughter is learning piano and your son wants to play baseball this summer. He remembers when you were pregnant and left a note asking for extra milk because the doctor said you needed more calcium. He brought an extra quart without charging you, just tucked it in with the order and a note that said, "Congratulations," scribbled in pencil. The truck he drives is white, boxy, with the dairy's name painted on the side in cheerful letters. It moves slowly down the street, stopping and starting in a rhythm you could time your morning by. You hear it before dawn most days, the low rumble of the engine, the gentle rattle of glass, the soft thud of his boots on pavement. Other neighbourhoods have their own milkmen, their own Eds and Franks, all moving through the half-light with the same quiet efficiency. Sometimes you leave him a note in the empty bottles, need an extra quart Thursday, or we'll be away next week, please skip Monday and Tuesday. He reads them, adjusts your order, and leaves a note of his own confirming. This system works because it's built on trust and routine, two things your neighbourhood has in abundance. In the winter, the milk freezes if you don't bring it in quickly enough. The cream pushes up through the cardboard cap like a small frozen tower, and you have to let it thaw on the counter before you can pour it. In the summer, you rush to get the bottles into the icebox before the sun warms them. Warm milk is no good to anyone. When you pay your bill at the end of the month, you add a little extra, a tip that Ed never mentions but always accepts with a nod and a quiet thank you. It's a small gesture, but it matters. Because in a world that's starting to move faster, to grow louder, to feel more anonymous, there's something deeply comforting about a man who knows your family, who shows up when he says he will, and who treats your morning milk delivery like it's the most important job in the world. It is mid-morning now, and you step outside to check the mailbox. You don't lock the door behind you. Nobody does. The idea of locking your front door during daylight hours would seem almost paranoid, like you were expecting trouble that simply didn't exist in neighbourhoods like this one. Trust was the currency here, unspoken but universally understood. Your neighbours didn't need to prove they were trustworthy. It was assumed. You left your doors unlocked not because crime didn't exist, it did, but because your street felt insulated from it, protected by familiarity and the quiet watchfulness of people who noticed when something seemed off. The front door closes behind you with a soft click, the latch settling into place but not locking, never locking. The screen door drifts shut on its own, the spring hinge pulling it back with a metallic sigh that every house on the block makes, a sound so common it becomes part of the neighbourhood's ambient music. You walk down the front steps, across the lawn that your husband mowed yesterday, the cut grass still releasing its green sweetness into the warm air. Mrs. Patterson waves from her, porch across the street. She's sitting in her usual spot, a wicker chair with a faded cushion, snapping green beans into a metal bowl balanced on her lap. You wave back, call out a greeting about the weather, and she nods in agreement. The weather is always a safe topic, always worth discussing, even when nothing particularly interesting is happening with it. Your mailbox stands at the curb, a simple metal box painted to match your shutters. You open it, pull out the stack of mail, bills, a letter from your sister, a catalogue from Sears. You tuck them under your arm and turn back toward the house, noticing that your neighbour's car is gone. He must have left for work earlier than usual. You make a mental note, not because it matters, but because noticing is what people do here. Noticing is how the neighbourhood stays safe. You walk back inside, leaving the door unlocked again. It will stay that way until evening, until your husband comes home and locks it before bed, a nightly ritual that feels more like tradition than necessity. During the day, the house remains open, accessible, welcoming to anyone who might need something, and people do stop by. Your neighbour might knock and walk in to borrow an egg. A friend might appear at the back door with a basket of tomatoes from her garden. The insurance man will ring the bell and step inside when you call out to come in. This openness isn't carelessness, it's confidence. Confidence that your neighbours are watching, that strangers would be noticed immediately, that trouble would be seen coming from blocks away. You know the cars that belong on your street. You know the faces. You know the rhythms of who leaves when and who's usually home. This knowledge isn't gathered through surveillance or suspicion. It's simply absorbed, the way you absorb the smell of dinner cooking or the sound of children playing. At night, things are different, but not by much. You lock the doors, yes, but mostly out of habit, a small gesture, toward caution that feels almost ceremonial. The windows stay open in summer, screens letting in the breeze and the sounds of the neighbourhood settling down for sleep. If someone truly wanted to break in, an unlocked window wouldn't stop them. But no one does, because everyone knows that on a street like this, nothing goes unnoticed for long. There's a freedom in this kind of trust, a lightness that comes from not having to guard everything all the time. You don't check and recheck the locks. You don't install elaborate security systems or peer through peepholes before opening the door. You simply live, moving in and out of your home as easily as you move between rooms, trusting that your neighbourhood is watching, not with suspicion, but with care. The telephone on your kitchen wall rings with a pattern you recognise instantly. 2 short rings, a pause, then 1 long one. That's your signal. On a party line, multiple families share the same telephone connection, which means every call is a small exercise in etiquette and patience. When you pick up the receiver, you might hear your neighbour Mrs. Henderson mid-conversation, her voice drifting across the line as she discusses her grocery list or her daughter's piano recital. You wait politely, not interrupting, even though you need to make a call of your own. Privacy is a luxury on a party line, and secrets don't stay secret for long when 6 households can accidentally or intentionally listen in. The telephone itself is a heavy black thing mounted to the wall near the kitchen doorway, its cord coiled like a sleeping snake. The receiver is solid, substantial, weighted in a way that makes the act of holding it feel important. You lift it carefully, bringing it to your ear, and hear the line open with a soft click and the faint crackle of connection. Mrs. Henderson is still talking. Her voice carries that particular tone of someone deep in conversation, animated and unaware that anyone else might be listening. You catch fragments about her son's new job, something about a promotion, and the weather again. Always the weather. You wait. You've learned that interrupting is unforgivable on a party line, a breach of the unspoken code that governs shared telephone service. After a minute, maybe 2, you hear her say goodbye, hear another click as she hangs up, and then the line goes quiet. You wait another moment just to be sure, then you press the cradle down and lift it again, listening for the dial tone. It hums steadily in your ear, and you begin to dial, your finger fitting into the numbered holes on the rotary dial, pulling it around the stop, releasing, letting it spin back with a mechanical purr. The phone rings on the other end. Your sister picks up. You settle into the conversation, aware always that you're not alone on this line, that someone could pick up at any moment and hear everything you're saying. So you keep your voice measured, your topics safe. You talk about recipes, about your children, about plans for Sunday dinner. You don't mention anything too personal, anything that might travel beyond this call and show up tomorrow as gossip at the beauty parlour. Halfway through your conversation, you hear it. A tiny click, barely perceptible, the sound of someone else lifting their receiver. You pause. Your sister pauses. You both know what it means. Someone is listening. You don't say anything about it. You simply adjust your tone, maybe change the subject slightly. A subtle acknowledgement that the conversation is no longer private. Sometimes the eavesdropper stays silent, a ghost on the line. Sometimes they breathe loudly enough that you can hear them. Once in a while, someone will actually interrupt, unable to resist joining the conversation, or more commonly asking politely if they can use the line because they need to make an urgent call. When that happens, you say your goodbyes quickly, hang up, and wait your turn again later. The party line teaches you patience. It teaches you discretion. It teaches you that your voice, your words, your private thoughts, they're never entirely your own. And in a strange way, this feels appropriate for a neighbourhood like yours, where privacy exists but is never absolute, where everyone knows a little bit about everyone else, and where that knowledge somehow makes the community stronger rather than more fragmented. You finish your call, say goodbye to your sister, and hang the receiver back on its cradle. The telephone goes silent again, waiting for the next ring, the next pattern, the next voice travelling across the shared wire that connects all of you together. It is Saturday afternoon now, and you walk downtown to the drugstore. But you're not just going for aspirin or bandages, you're going for the soda fountain tucked in the back corner, where red vinyl stools line a marble counter, and the air smells like cherry syrup and fresh whipped cream. This isn't fast food, this is where your neighbourhood is. Gathers where teenagers sip root beer floats after school, where young mothers meet for egg creams while their children spin lazily on the stools, where older men read the newspaper over coffee that costs a nickel. The soda jerk behind the counter knows your order before you say it, knows your name, knows that you always ask for extra whipped cream. The walk downtown takes 15 minutes, past houses you know by heart, past Mrs. Patterson's porch and the corner where the paper boy sometimes leaves extra additions. The sidewalk is smooth in places, cracked in others, buckled by tree roots that have been growing underneath for decades. You pass the barber shop, the five and dime, the little bakery that puts fresh bread in the window every morning. The town is small enough that everything you need is within walking distance, close enough that driving would feel almost silly. The drugstore sits on the corner of Main and 3rd, a brick building with big windows and a green awning that flaps gently in the breeze. A bell jingles when you push through the door, announcing your arrival to whoever's inside. The front of the store is lined with shelves of medicine, cosmetics, greeting cards, school supplies, everything practical and ordinary. But you walk past all of it, heading toward the back, toward the sound of laughter and the hiss of the soda machine. The fountain counter gleams under the overhead lights, its white marble surface cool and smooth and spotted here and there with faint stains that no amount of scrubbing will ever fully remove. The stools are bolted to the floor, upholstered in red vinyl that squeaks when you sit down, each one topped with a round chrome backrest. You take a seat near the middle, spinning slightly as you settle in, your purse resting on your lap. Behind the counter, the soda jerk, a young man named Tommy, or maybe Ricky, looks up and grins. He's wearing a white paper hat and an apron, both slightly stained with chocolate syrup and cola. "The usual?" he asks, already reaching for a tall glass. You nod, and he goes to work, moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who's made 1,000 of these. He scoops vanilla ice cream into the glass, 2 generous scoops that land with a soft thud. Then he pulls the lever on the soda dispenser, filling the glass with root beer that fizzes and foams dramatically as it hits the ice cream. He tops it with whipped cream from a metal canister, a long swirl that peaks at the top and finishes with a cherry placed carefully in the centre. He slides the float across the counter toward you, along with a long spoon and a striped paper straw. You take a sip, the sweetness immediate and satisfying, the ice cream melting into the soda in a way that makes every mouthful different from the last. Around you, the fountain is alive with quiet activity. 2 teenage girls sit at the far end, whispering and giggling over shared milkshakes. A mother and her young son occupy the stools near the window, the boy swinging his legs and slurping his Coke with loud, joyful enthusiasm. An older man sits alone with his coffee and newspaper, occasionally glancing up to comment on something he's read. The soda fountain is a crossroads, a place where generations mix naturally, where you might sit next to someone decades older or younger and strike up a conversation without it feeling forced or strange. The counter is narrow enough that you're always within speaking distance of the people beside you, close enough that conversations drift and overlap, that someone else's laughter becomes part of your own experience. You stay longer than you planned, because that's what happens here. Time softens at the soda fountain. You finish your float slowly, scraping the last bits of melted ice cream from the bottom of the glass with your spoon. You chat with the woman next to you about the heat, about the new family moving in down the street, about nothing and everything, and when you finally stand to leave, you feel fuller than you did when you arrived, not just from the ice cream, but from the warmth of being part of something. part of a place where everybody knows your name and your order and always leaves room for extra whipped cream. Your refrigerator at home isn't a refrigerator, not in the way you'd recognize one today. It's an icebox, a heavy wooden cabinet lined with metal, kept cold by a large block of ice that sits in the upper compartment and slowly melts throughout the week. Every few days the iceman comes by, driving a truck packed with ice blocks cut from frozen lakes or manufactured in plants across the city. He's a strong man with leather gloves and shoulders built from years of hauling 50-pound blocks up front steps and into kitchens. Children follow his truck in the summer, begging for chips of ice to suck on in the heat, and he usually obliges, chipping off small pieces with his pick and handing them out like frozen treasures. You hear the truck before. You see it. The low rumble of its engine mixed with the clank of metal and ice shifting in the cargo bed. You step out onto the porch, wiping your hands on your apron, and watch as it pulls up to the curb. The iceman climbs out, moving with the steady, unhurried pace of someone who's done this route so many times he could do it in his sleep. He glances toward your house, sees you waiting, and nods. In your front window, you've placed a square cardboard sign, the kind every household on the block has. It's divided into 4 sections, each marked with a number: 25, 50, 75, 100. You've turned it so that 50 is at the top, visible from the street. £50. That's what you need today. The iceman sees it, makes a mental note, and moves to the back of his truck. He pulls back the heavy canvas tarp covering his load, revealing rows of ice blocks stacked like translucent bricks. They glisten in the sunlight, wet and slick, slowly melting even in the shade of the truck bed. He selects a block, grips it with iron tongs that bite into the ice with a satisfying crunch, and hoists it onto his shoulder. The ice rests against the leather pad he wears, protecting his shirt and skin from the cold and wet. He carries it up your front walk, across the porch, and into your kitchen without waiting for an invitation. He knows the way. He's been bringing ice to this house for years. Inside, he moves to the icebox in the corner, opens the heavy door, and pulls out the old block, now reduced to a much smaller piece, rounded at the edges and slick with melt. He sets it aside in the metal drip pan underneath the icebox, then slides the new block into place. It fits perfectly, filling the upper compartment, already beginning its slow transformation from solid to liquid. The iceman straightens, wipes his gloved hands on his apron, and gives you a brief nod. You hand him a few coins from the jar you keep on the counter, and he pockets them without counting. He trusts you. You trust him. This is how business works in neighbourhoods like this one. Before he leaves, your children appear, drawn by the sound of his truck the way other children are drawn to candy stores. They hover near the back of the truck, eyes wide, hopeful. The iceman smiles, a rare expression on his weathered face, and reaches for his ice pick. He chips off several small pieces, chunks about the size of a walnut, and hands them to the children. They grab them eagerly, ignoring the cold burning their palms, and immediately pop them into their mouths, sucking on the ice as though it's the best thing they've ever tasted. By evening, the new block has already begun to melt, water dripping steadily into the pan below, a soft rhythmic sound that becomes part of the kitchen's background music. You'll empty the pan before bed, pouring the cold water down the sink, and again in the morning. This is part of the routine, part of the rhythm of keeping an icebox. It's inconvenient, yes, but it's also reliable, simple, something you understand without needing an instruction manual or a repairman. The iceman will return in a few days and you'll go through the ritual again. The sign in the window, the truck at the curb, the heavy block carried inside, the children trailing behind hoping for chips of ice. And the cycle will continue, week after week, season after season, until one day, years from now, someone invents something better and the iceman stops coming and your street feels just a little bit emptier for his absence. Monday is laundry day, and that means the backyard clotheslines go up all down the block. You carry your wicker basket outside, damp sheets and towels heavy in your arms, and begin pinning them one by one to the line strung between two metal poles. Your neighbour on the left is doing the same, and so is the woman across the alley. Clotheslines create a kind of outdoor parlour, a place where women talk while they work, sharing recipes, advice, complaints about husbands who track mud indoors, and quiet concerns about children who seem to be growing up too fast. The conversations are easy, unhurried, punctuated by the snap of wet fabric and the wooden click of clothespins. The morning is already warm, the kind of warmth that promises real heat by afternoon. You balance the basket on your hip and reach for the first sheet, shaking it out with a sharp crack that sends droplets of water flying. The fabric is cool and heavy, still damp from the wringer washer you ran in the basement earlier. You drape it over the line, stretching it taut, then secure it with 2 wooden clothespins, one at each end. Your neighbour, Dorothy, appears on the other side of the hedge, her own basket propped against her hip. She's humming something, a tune you half recognise from the radio, and she smiles when she sees you. "Hot one today," she calls over. "Going to be a scorcher," you agree, reaching for another sheet. The conversation flows naturally from there, bouncing between topics the way conversations between women often do. No rigid structure, no agenda, just the easy exchange of thoughts and worries and observations. Dorothy mentions that her youngest has been asking for a bicycle, but money's tight, and she's not sure they can afford it. You suggest checking the church bulletin. Someone's always selling something their children have outgrown. She nods, considers this, pins a pillowcase to her line. Behind you, another neighbour emerges, Mrs. Chen, carrying a basket of her husband's work shirts. She joins the conversation without preamble, as if she's been part of it all along. Her English is accented but clear, and she talks about the garden she's planting, the tomatoes that are finally starting to ripen, the rabbits that keep getting through the fence despite her best efforts. The 3 of you work in a comfortable rhythm, hanging laundry and talking, the lines between your yards becoming invisible, irrelevant. The clotheslines themselves form a kind of web, connecting house to house, yard to yard, woman to woman. White sheets flap in the breeze like flags of domestic labour. Towels hang heavy and still. Children's clothes, small and colourful, dangle like bright punctuation marks. A towel slips from your grip and lands in the grass. You pick it up, brush off a blade or 2 and hang it again. Dorothy laughs, says her daughter did the same thing this morning and nearly cried about it, convinced the towel was ruined forever. You laugh too, because that's exactly the kind of thing children worry about. The small catastrophes that feel enormous when you're 7 years old. The conversation shifts to recipes. Mrs. Chen describes a dish her mother used to make, something with ginger and soy sauce that you've never heard of but suddenly want to try. Dorothy offers her mother's recipe for apple pie, the one with the butter crust that everybody asks for at church suppers. You mention the casserole you're planning for. Dinner, the one with ground beef and noodles and cream of mushroom soup, the same one you make every Monday because it's easy and your family likes it. By the time your basket is empty, the line is full, heavy with clean laundry that will dry by mid-afternoon, stiff and sun-warmed and smelling like fresh air and sunshine. You gather your clothespins, drop them into the small cloth bag you keep hanging from the line, and turn back toward the house. Dorothy waves. Mrs. Chen calls out a reminder about the church potluck on Wednesday. You wave back. Promise you'll be there. Step inside. The kitchen is dim and cool after the brightness of the yard. You set the empty basket down, pour yourself a glass of water, and stand at the sink for a moment, looking out the window at the rows of laundry dancing in the breeze. This is Monday, This is laundry day. This is the rhythm your week follows, predictable and somehow comforting in its repetition. And tomorrow, when you bring the dry clothes, inside you'll fold them in the living room while you listen to the radio, and the whole cycle will begin again the following Monday, endless and familiar, and exactly the way it's supposed to be. Every afternoon at 4:30, a boy of maybe 13 rides his bicycle down your street, a canvas bag slung over his shoulder stuffed with folded newspapers. He's the paper boy, and he takes his job seriously. He's saving for college, or maybe a car, or maybe just trying to prove to his father that he's responsible enough to be trusted with something that matters. He knows every house on his route, knows which porches to avoid because of loose boards, knows which dogs bark and which ones wag, knows which customers tip at the end of the month, and which ones make him knock 3 times before they answer. His name is Jimmy, or maybe it's Robert, but everyone calls him Bobby. He's a lanky kid, all elbows and knees, still growing into a frame that promises he'll be tall like his father. His bicycle is nothing special. A hand-me-down from an older brother, with rust spots on the fenders and a bell that doesn't ring anymore. But it's sturdy, reliable, and it gets him through his route every single day, rain or shine. He rides with practiced ease, steering with one hand while the other reaches into his bag for the next folded paper. He doesn't even need to look. His hands know the routine, pulling out a paper, checking the address written in pencil on the corner, and flinging it with a snap of his wrist toward the porch. Most of the time it lands exactly where it's supposed to, right in front of the door or on the welcome mat. Occasionally it goes wide, landing in the bushes or on the grass, and when that happens, he stops, gets off his bike and carries it the rest of the way. He doesn't cut corners. His father taught him that. You wait for him on the porch sometimes, not because you need to, but because you like seeing him, like the reliability of his arrival, like the fact that he always says hello and thank you and have a nice evening. Today you're sitting in the wicker chair when he pulls up, and he brakes smoothly at the curb, sets one foot on the ground to steady himself. "Afternoon, Mrs. Harrison," he calls, pulling your paper from his bag. He walks it up to the porch and hands it to you directly rather than tossing it. You're one of his favourites, one of the customers who always pays on time, and sometimes adds an extra quarter at the end of the month. "Hot one today," you say, taking the paper. "Yes, ma'am," he agrees, wiping his forehead with the back of his arm, but not as bad as last week. You ask him how his summer's going, and he tells you about his job, about how he's saved almost enough for a new bicycle, a better one, the kind with gears and handbrakes. He's proud of this. You can hear it in his voice, the pride of someone earning something through their own effort. He mentions that he's thinking about college, maybe studying engineering, like his uncle, but that's still a long way off. You tell him that sounds wonderful, that his parents must be proud. He smiles, a little embarrassed, and says he should get going, lots more papers to deliver before dinner. You watch as he climbs back on his bike and pedals down the street, the canvas bag lighter now bouncing against his hip. He stops at the next house, tosses the paper with that same practiced flick of the wrist, and keeps moving. By the time winter comes, he'll still be out there, riding through snow and ice and wind, the papers wrapped in plastic bags to keep them dry, his hands red and raw from the cold. By the time spring returns, he'll have saved enough for that new bicycle, and you'll see him riding it with visible pride, sitting a little taller, pedalling a little faster. And in a few years, when he graduates high school and heads off to college, someone else will take over his route. Another kid saving for something, learning responsibility, one newspaper at a time. But for now, he's just Bobby, the paper boy, riding his rusty bicycle down your street every afternoon at 4:30, delivering the news and proving to himself and to everyone watching that hard work means something, that showing up matters, and that the future belongs to people willing to earn it one folded newspaper at a time. There's a man on your street everyone calls when something breaks, and in the 1950s things break often. Washing machines leak, Lawn mowers sputter and die. Screen doors come off their hinges in the summer heat. This man, usually older, semi-retired, with hands that have built and rebuilt more things than he can count, shows up with a toolbox that weighs as much as a child and seems to contain every bolt, screw, and widget ever manufactured. He doesn't charge much, sometimes nothing at all, because fixing things is what he does, what he's always done, and he'd rather stay busy than sit idle. His name is Mr. Kowalski, and he lives houses down in a tidy bungalow with a workshop in the garage that smells like sawdust and machine oil. He's in his 60s, maybe older, with white hair combed straight back and hands that are permanently stained with grease and calluses. He walks with a slight limp, something from the war, though he never talks about it. What he does talk about is work, projects, the satisfaction of taking something broken and making it whole again. This morning your washing machine has started making a noise it shouldn't make. A grinding, protesting sound that suggests something inside has come loose or worn out. You mention it to your husband at breakfast, and he says he'll take a look at it after work. But you know how that goes. After work turns into this weekend, and this weekend turns into next month, and by then the machine will have stopped working altogether. So instead, you walk down to Mr. Kowalski's house and knock on his side door, the one that leads to the garage. He answers, wiping his hands on a rag, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. Behind him you can see his workbench, organised chaos, tools hanging on pegboards, coffee cans full of screws sorted by size, half-finished projects in various stages of completion. "Washing machine?" he asks, even though you haven't said anything yet. Somehow he always knows. You nod, apologetic, if you have time. He waves off the apology. "Let me get my tools." 10 minutes later, he's in your basement, kneeling beside the washing machine with his toolbox open on the floor beside him. He works quietly, methodically, unscrewing the back panel and peering inside with a flashlight. He makes small noises while he works, little grunts and hums that suggest he's diagnosing the problem, having a conversation with the machine that only he can hear. You bring him a glass of water and offer to pay him, but he shakes his head. "Let me see what's wrong first," he says. Might be nothing, might be something. It turns out to be a worn belt, something that needs replacing. He doesn't have the part with him, but he knows where to get one, says he'll pick it up tomorrow and come back to install it. You insist on paying him then, and he accepts 25 cents with a shrug, folding the bill into his shirt pocket without looking at it. Over the years, Mr. Kowalski has fixed almost everything in your house at one time or another. The dripping faucet in the kitchen, the stuck window in the bedroom, the lawnmower that wouldn't start, the lamp that flickered, the door that squeaked. Each time he shows up with his toolbox, works in quiet concentration, and refuses to accept more than a token payment. When you try to thank him properly, to express how much his help means, he just shrugs and says, "That's what neighbours do." And that's the thing about Mr. Kowalski. He doesn't fix things for money. He fixes things because he can, because he knows how, because the alternative, watching something broken stay broken when he has the skills to repair it, is unthinkable to him. He's a man who measures his worth not in dollars, but in problems solved, in machines brought back to life, in the grateful smiles of neighbours who know they can count on him. Someday, maybe soon, Mr. Kowalski will get too old to climb stairs or kneel on basement floors. Someday his hands will shake too much to thread small screws, or his eyes will fail to see the tiny mechanisms inside broken appliances. And when that day comes, your street will feel the loss deeply, because men like him, men who fix things not for profit but for purpose, are becoming rarer every year, and no one is quite sure who will take his place. You step into the diner on the corner, the one with the red neon sign and the smell of bacon grease that hits you the moment the door swings open. The booths are upholstered in cracked vinyl. repaired with duct tape in places, and the jukebox in the corner plays songs you've heard 1,000 times. The waitress behind the counter looks up, sees you, and starts pouring your coffee before you even sit down. She knows you take it black. She knows you usually order the meatloaf on Thursdays and the tuna melt on Saturdays. She knows your name, your kids' names, and probably more about your life than you'd care to admit. The door closes behind you with a soft chime, and the noise of the diner washes over you, a comforting blend of conversation, clinking dishes, and the sizzle of the griddle. The air is warm, slightly greasy, and smells like coffee and toast and something sweet baking in the back. You take your usual seat at the counter, third stool from the left, the one with the red vinyl that's worn smooth from years of use. Marge, the waitress, sets your coffee down before you've even settled onto the stool. She's been working here longer than you've been coming, which is saying something, because you've been coming since before you were married. She's somewhere in her 50s with hair dyed an improbable shade of auburn and a face that's kind despite the permanent tiredness in her eyes. She wears a pale blue uniform with her name embroidered over the pocket, and sensible shoes that have seen better decades. The usual, she asks, though she's already writing it down on her pad. You nod. The usual on Thursday means meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, white bread with butter. It's the same thing you order every Thursday, and it's the same thing you'll order next Thursday, because that's how diners work. Consistency is the point. Familiarity is what brings people back. While you wait, you sip your coffee and watch the diner move around you. 2 booths down, an older couple sits in companionable silence, working their way through matching plates of eggs and bacon. At the far end of the counter, a truck driver hunches over a bowl of chili, mopping it up with crackers. Near the window, a young mother tries to keep her toddler entertained while she eats her own lunch, one-handed, distracted. The jukebox plays something by Patti Page, and Marge hums along while she refills coffee cups down the line. She knows everyone here, knows their orders, their habits, their stories. She knows the truck driver always adds extra hot sauce to his chili. She knows the older couple splits a piece of pie for dessert. She knows the young mother will ask for a to-go box because her son won't let her finish in peace. Your food arrives, the plate still hot from the kitchen, steam rising from the mashed potatoes. The meatloaf is thick and dark, covered in a glossy layer of ketchup-based glaze. The green beans glisten with butter. The bread is soft, white, exactly what you expected. You take a bite, and it tastes the same as it did last week, last month, last year. This is part of the appeal. Change is everywhere else, but here, in this diner, things stay the same. Marge pauses to refill your coffee. Your boy doing okay in school? She asks, remembering a conversation from 2 weeks ago when you mentioned he was struggling with mathematics. Better, you say. Got a tutor? She nods approvingly. Good. Kids need help sometimes. Nothing wrong with that. This is what the diner offers, not just food, but connection. A place where someone remembers your name, your order, your children, your small victories and quiet worries. It's not fancy. The vinyl is cracked, the jukebox is outdated, and the coffee is strong enough to dissolve a spoon, but it's yours, in the way that places become yours when you show up often enough, when you're woven into the fabric of the space, when leaving would mean losing something you didn't realize you needed. You finish your meal, leave a tip on the counter, pay your bill at the register. Marge waves goodbye, says she'll see you Saturday for your tuna melt. You step back outside, into the afternoon sunlight, feeling fuller than you should from a simple plate of meatloaf. Fuller, because being known, being remembered, being part of a place where everybody recognizes you, feels something deeper than hunger. It is summer evening now, and the street is alive with children. They're everywhere, running barefoot across lawns, riding bikes in wide loops, playing kick the can under the streetlights that have just begun to flicker on. There are no play dates scheduled weeks in advance, No supervised activities or mandatory helmets. The kids simply spill outside after dinner and stay there until their mothers call them home, voices echoing down the block in that universal tone that means bedtime is no longer negotiable. The games are invented on the spot, the rules argued over and adjusted mid-play, and nobody seems to worry much about where the children are because everyone on the street is watching, loosely, collectively. The sun is low now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. That perfect hour when the heat of the day has faded but darkness hasn't quite arrived. You sit on your front porch, shelling peas into a metal bowl, half watching your children and half listening to the sounds of the neighbourhood settling into evening. Your son races past on his bicycle, no hands, showing off for the cluster of kids gathered near the Hendersons' driveway. Your daughter is somewhere down the block. You can hear her voice rising above the others as they argue about the rules of whatever game they've invented. Red Rover, maybe, or Statue, or something with no name that will be forgotten by tomorrow and replaced with something new. The street has become a playground, as it does every evening in summer. Bicycles lean against tree trunks, abandoned mid-ride when something more interesting appeared. A jump rope lies coiled in the middle of the road like a sleeping snake. Someone's ball sits in the gutter, waiting to be retrieved. The children move in packs, fluid and democratic, ages mixing naturally because there aren't enough kids on any one block to be picky about who plays with whom. A game of kick the can begins. Near the streetlight, the can placed carefully in the centre of a chalk circle drawn on the asphalt. Someone is chosen to be it, and the rest scatter, hiding behind cars, hedges, garbage cans, anywhere that offers cover. The seeker counts, voice carrying through the twilight, and when they finish, the hunt begins. Shrieks of laughter erupt when someone is tagged, groans of frustration when the can is kicked and everyone is freed to hide again. You glance up occasionally, checking on your own children without hovering, without supervising every moment. This is the unspoken agreement of neighbourhoods like this one. Parents watch from porches, from windows, from gardens where they're pulling weeds. They don't watch constantly, but they watch enough. Everyone knows which children belong to which house. Everyone notices when something seems wrong, when a child wanders too far or stays out too late, or cries in a way that suggests real hurt rather than typical playground drama. Mrs. Patterson sits on her porch across the street, the same porch where she snaps beans and keeps an eye on the comings and goings of the neighbourhood. Tonight she's knitting, her needles clicking rhythmically, but her gaze sweeps the street regularly, checking, noticing, remembering. If your daughter wandered beyond the boundaries, if your son fell and scraped his knee badly enough to need attention, Mrs. Patterson would know before you did, and she'd call out to let you know. The streetlights hum and glow brighter as the sky darkens. Moths begin to circle the lights, and the children's games take on a different quality, more frantic, more urgent, as if they know their time is running out. A few parents have already started calling their children home, voices floating through the warm air. "Tommy, time to come in. Sarah, your father wants you home now." The children resist as long as they can, begging for 5 more minutes, just 5 more minutes, as if those 5 minutes will somehow last forever. Some parents relent, others hold firm. Gradually the street begins to empty, children peeling away one by one, heading toward lit porches and open doors, toward baths and bedtime stories and the end of another summer day. Your daughter appears, grass-stained and sweaty, grinning in a way that suggests she's had the kind of day childhood is supposed to provide. Your son follows a few minutes later, his bicycle making that familiar click-click-click sound as he coasts up the driveway. They're tired, happy, and completely unaware that this, right now, this freedom to play until dark on a street where everyone knows their name, is something they'll remember for the rest of their lives. something they'll describe to their own children someday, with a wistfulness they don't yet understand. You gather your bowl of shelled peas and stand, calling them inside. They come reluctantly, looking back over their shoulders at the street, now nearly empty, the game of kick the can abandoned, until tomorrow. The screen door closes behind you with its familiar metallic sigh, and the evening settles into the quiet routines of bath time, bedtime, another day ending in a neighbourhood where childhood still means running barefoot until the streetlights come on and somebody's mother calls you home. Once a week, you hear a sound that has become as familiar as the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the slow, grinding whir of a sharpening wheel, accompanied by the gentle clang of a bell. The knife sharpener has arrived, pushing his cart down the sidewalk, calling out in a voice worn smooth by years of repetition. You gather your dull kitchen knives, the ones that have been struggling to cut through tomatoes and chicken, and step outside to meet him. He sets up his wheel, pumps the pedal to get it spinning, and holds each blade against the stone with the careful precision of someone who's done this 10,000 times. The cart itself is a marvel of compact efficiency, built from wood and metal, designed to carry everything he needs for his trade. The grinding wheel sits at the centre, mounted on a frame that keeps it steady while he works. Beneath it, a pedal connects to the wheel through a series of gears and belts, so that when he pumps his foot, the wheel spins with a steady hypnotic rhythm. Tools hang from hooks along the sides, files, honing stones, oil cans, rags darkened with years of metal dust and polish. He's an older man, 60 at least, maybe more, with forearms that suggest decades of repetitive labour. His face is weathered, lined deeply around the eyes and mouth, and his hands are strong despite their age, fingers calloused and stained with the evidence of his work. He wears a leather apron, dark and worn smooth, and a flat cap that shades his eyes from the sun. You hand him your knives one by one, and he examines each blade with the serious attention of a craftsman assessing the damage. He runs his thumb carefully along the edge, testing for nicks and dull spots, nodding to himself as he makes mental notes about what each knife needs. Then he sets the first one against the spinning wheel, and sparks fly in a brief, beautiful cascade. Tiny orange stars that disappear almost as soon as they appear. The sound is distinctive, impossible to ignore, a metallic song that carries down the block and draws other women from their kitchens. Your neighbour appears with her own collection of knives wrapped in a dish towel. The woman from 2 houses down comes out carrying scissors that haven't closed properly in months. A few minutes later, someone else arrives with garden shears and a hatchet that needs attention. You stand together in a loose cluster, watching him work, talking quietly among yourselves while he restores edges to blades. The conversation drifts naturally from topic to topic. Someone's daughter got engaged. Someone's son enlisted. The Johnsons are thinking about selling their house and moving closer to family. The knife sharpener works through it all, his wheel spinning, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, occasionally pausing to test an edge against his thumb or hold a blade up to the light to check his progress. When he finishes with your knives, he wraps them carefully in newspaper before handing them back, protecting the newly sharpened edges. You pay him, coins from your purse, and he nods his thanks without much ceremony. He's already moving on to the next customer, the next blade, the wheel spinning again, sparks flying. By the time he packs up his cart and continues down the street, your knives are sharper than they've been in months. That evening, when you slice tomatoes for dinner, the knife glides through the skin without resistance, cutting clean, perfect circles that hold their shape on the cutting board. It's a small thing, a small improvement, but it makes the work easier, makes cooking feel less like a chore and more like something you can take pleasure in. The knife sharpener will return next week, the week after that, his cart rattling down the sidewalk, his bell announcing his arrival, his wheel ready to restore edges to tools that have grown dull with use. And you'll gather your knives again, step outside to meet him, and take your place among the neighbours who understand that some services, some small rituals, are worth preserving simply because they work, because they connect people, because they remind you that even in a world that's changing faster than anyone can quite keep up with, some things, some people, remain steady and reliable and exactly where you need them to be. Nobody on your street uses the term neighbourhood watch, but that's exactly what it is. Mrs. Patterson sits on her porch every afternoon with her knitting, but she's not just knitting, she's noticing. She sees the mail carrier come and go, sees which cars are parked where they shouldn't be, sees the boy from 2 blocks over who sometimes cuts through yards instead of staying on the sidewalk. She doesn't report anyone to the police because most of what she sees doesn't warrant that, but she mentions things, casually, to the right people, and somehow problems get solved before they become real problems. She's been sitting on that porch for as long as you can remember, a permanent fixture of the street, as reliable as the mailbox or the streetlight. Her chair is positioned perfectly to see everything: the front sidewalk, the intersection at the corner, most of the driveways on both sides of the street. In winter she moves inside but still sits by the front window, her knitting in her lap, her gaze sweeping the street at regular intervals. Other neighbours do their part too, though none of it is coordinated or official. Mr. Chen walks his dog every evening at 7, the same route every time, and he notices things. Lights left on in empty houses, newspapers piling up on porches, unfamiliar cars idling too long at the curb. He doesn't confront anyone, doesn't make accusations, but he mentions what he's seen to his wife, who mentions it to someone at church, who mentions it to someone else, and eventually the information reaches whoever needs to know. You contribute too without really thinking about it. When you're pulling weeds in the front garden or sweeping the porch, you see who's coming and going. You notice when the Millers leave for vacation and make a mental note to keep an eye on their house. You see the teenager from down the block sneaking cigarettes behind the garage and decide whether it's worth mentioning to his parents or if it's the kind of thing that will resolve itself. You watch the new family moving in across the street, observing their routines, their children, their habits, not out of nosiness but out of the practical need to know who belongs and who doesn't. This watching, this collective vigilance, creates a safety net that's invisible but effective. When something unusual happens, multiple people notice. When someone needs help, multiple people respond. Last month, Mrs. Henderson fell on her front steps and couldn't get up. 3 neighbours saw it happen. 1 called for help while the other 2 rushed over to make sure she was comfortable until the ambulance arrived. Nobody had to organise this response. It simply happened because people were watching, because paying attention is what neighbours do. The watching also prevents problems. Teenagers know they can't get away with much because someone will see and someone will tell their parents. Strangers who might be casing houses for burglaries realise quickly that this street notices unfamiliar faces, that people here pay attention. Salesmen learn that knocking on doors means encountering residents who know exactly who should and shouldn't be walking up their front paths. But the watching isn't invasive or judgmental, at least not usually. People understand the difference between noticing and prying, between awareness and surveillance. You don't peer through your neighbours' windows or rifle through their mail. You don't spread gossip about private matters or make assumptions about things that aren't your business. You simply stay alert, stay aware, and trust that your neighbours are doing the same. Sometimes Mrs. Patterson sees something worth sharing. She mentions to your husband that someone's been parking a dark blue sedan at the end of the block late at night. Your husband mentions it to Officer Riley, who lives 2 streets over, and Officer Riley makes a point to drive by on his way home from his shift. The sedan stops appearing. Problem solved. Quietly, efficiently, without drama or police reports or neighbourhood meetings. This is how safety works in neighbourhoods like yours. Not through locks and alarms and formal security systems, though some people are starting to install those, but through the simple act of people knowing each other, watching out for each other, and caring enough to notice when something seems off. It's not perfect. Things still happen, packages get stolen, cars get broken into occasionally, but the sense of collective watchfulness makes everyone feel a little bit safer, a little bit more connected, a little bit less alone. And so Mrs. Patterson continues to sit on her porch with her knitting, her needles clicking steadily, her eyes scanning the street with the practiced ease of someone who's been doing this for decades. She's not spying, she's not intruding, she's simply watching, the way neighbours have always watched, the way communities have always protected themselves, one pair of eyes at a time, one porch at a time, one street at a time. Even though the war ended years ago, many families on your street still keep victory gardens in their backyards. What started as a patriotic duty has become a habit, a way of life that makes sense even in peacetime. You grow tomatoes, green beans, lettuce, maybe some carrots if the soil cooperates. Your neighbour grows zucchini and cucumbers. Another family down the block has an impressive row of corn. People trade what they grow, swapping jars of homemade pickles for fresh herbs, baskets of tomatoes for bags of potatoes, creating an informal economy based on generosity and the shared understanding that everyone benefits when everyone contributes. Your garden takes up a good portion of the backyard, carved out of what used to be lawn, marked off with stakes and string. The soil is dark and rich, improved over years of composting kitchen scraps and fallen leaves. In spring, you turn it over with a spade, breaking up the clumps, mixing in aged manure from a farm outside town, preparing the earth to receive seeds. Planting happens in stages. The lettuce and peas go in early, while the mornings are still cool and the threat of frost hasn't completely passed. Then come the tomatoes, purchased as seedlings from the hardware store, their stems thin and vulnerable, needing support from wooden stakes driven deep into the ground. The beans follow, pushed into the soil with your finger, 3 seeds to a hole, just like your mother taught you. Zucchini, cucumbers, peppers, each plant placed according to some internal logic you've developed over years of trial and error. By midsummer, the garden is lush and overwhelming. Tomatoes hang heavy on their vines, some red and ripe, others still green and hard, waiting for more sun. The beans climb their poles in twisting spirals, producing more than your family can possibly eat. Zucchini appears overnight, multiplying with aggressive enthusiasm, growing from small to enormous in what seems like hours. You pick them every other day and still can't keep up. This is when the trading begins. You walk down the street with a basket of tomatoes, knock on your neighbour's door, and ask if she'd like some in exchange for a few cucumbers. She agrees, and the exchange happens on the front porch, both of you admiring what the other has grown, sharing tips about watering and pests, control, complaining about the rabbits that keep getting through the fences no matter what you do to stop them. The widow 3 doors down grows herbs, basil, oregano, thyme, parsley. Her garden is smaller than yours, more focused, and she's generous with cuttings. You bring her tomatoes and beans, and she sends you home with bundles of fresh basil that fill your kitchen with their peppery sweetness. You make sauce, more sauce than you need, and you share that too, delivering mason jars to neighbours who don't have gardens or don't have time to cook. The garden also teaches your children things that school doesn't. They learn that food doesn't come from stores, that it starts as seeds, that it requires work and patience and attention. Your son helps you plant, his small hands pushing beans into the earth, and weeks later he's amazed when green shoots appear, then vines, then actual beans he can pick and eat. Your daughter waters in the evenings, dragging the hose across the yard, learning to be gentle, to give each plant what it needs without washing away the soil. There's something deeply satisfying about growing your own food, about stepping into the backyard and gathering dinner directly from the earth. It connects you to something older, something more fundamental than the modern world of supermarkets and packaged goods. When you slice a tomato you grew yourself, still warm from the sun, and taste its bright acidity, you understand why people did this for thousands of years before refrigeration and shipping made it unnecessary. By fall, the garden begins to fade. The tomatoes slow their production, the beans stop climbing, the lettuce goes to seed. You pull up the spent plants, shake the soil from their roots, add them to the compost pile that will feed next year's garden. You harvest the last of the vegetables, store what you can, give away what you can't, and let the garden rest through winter. But even in the cold months, you're already thinking about spring, about what you'll plant differently, what worked and what didn't, what new varieties you want to try. Because the victory garden stopped being about patriotism years ago. Now it's about connection to the earth, to your neighbours, to the quiet satisfaction of making something grow. Once a month, a man in a suit and fedora walks up your front steps, briefcase in hand, and rings your doorbell. He's your insurance man, and he collects premiums in person, sitting at your kitchen table while you write him a cheque or hand over cash. He's sold you life insurance, maybe car insurance, maybe even a small policy for your children's future. He knows your family's financial situation better than most people, knows when money is tight and when you're doing well, and he adjusts his approach accordingly, never pushy, always patient. His name is Mr. Clemens, and he's been making this rounds for 15 years, long enough that he knew your street before half the houses were built. He arrives at the same time each month, usually mid-morning on a Tuesday, carrying that same battered leather briefcase, and wearing one of 3 suits he rotates through. He's in his 40s, balding slightly, with the kind face of someone who's learned to read people quickly and adjust his pitch accordingly. You invite him in without hesitation. He's not a stranger, not really, even though his relationship with your family is purely professional. He knows too much, has been around too long, has sat at this table too many times to feel like an outsider. You offer him coffee, which he accepts, and a piece of the coffee cake you baked this morning, which he politely declines but always reconsiders when you insist. He sets his briefcase on the table and opens it with practiced efficiency, pulling out a ledger where your family's information is recorded in his neat, slanted handwriting. He reviews your policies, asks if anything has changed, if you've bought a new car or had another child or made any major purchases that might require additional coverage. You answer his questions honestly because he's never given you a reason not to trust him. The conversation shifts naturally from business to personal. He asks about your children, remembers their names and ages without consulting his notes. He mentions his own daughter is applying to colleges, that his wife's garden is doing well this year, that he's thinking about taking a vacation to the lake next summer if business stays steady. These details matter, not because they're relevant to insurance, but because they're what transforms a transaction into a relationship. When it's time to collect the premium, he does so without awkwardness. You hand him cash, the exact amount, counted out that morning and set aside in an envelope. He writes you a receipt in duplicate, tears off your copy, and tucks his into the briefcase alongside his ledger. If money is tight, he notices, though he never comments directly. Instead, he might mention that it's fine to pay a few days late if needed, or suggest adjusting the policy slightly to lower the monthly cost. This personal service, this face-to-face interaction, creates accountability on both sides. You're more likely to pay on time because you know Mr. Clemens personally, because skipping a payment would mean disappointing someone you've come to respect. He's more likely to go out of his way to help you because you're not just a policy number. You're a family he visits every month, people whose lives he's genuinely invested in. Sometimes he brings news from other parts of his route, not gossip exactly, but updates about the neighbourhood. The Martins bought a new Buick, The Kellys just had their third child. The Johnsons are thinking about adding a room to their house. He's like a travelling newspaper carrying information from house to house, connecting the community in small but meaningful ways. Before he leaves, he reminds you when he'll be back next month, makes a note in his calendar, and tips his hat politely. You walk him to the door, and he steps out into the morning sunshine, briefcase in hand, already thinking about his next stop 3 houses down. By noon, he'll have visited a dozen families, collected premiums, written receipts, shared coffee and conversation, and reinforced the web of relationships that makes his business work. In a few years, companies will start sending bills through the mail, expecting customers to pay by check without ever meeting the person on the other end. The personal touch will fade, efficiency will replace familiarity, and insurance will become something handled by strangers in distant offices. But for now, Mr. Clemens still walks your street every month, still sits at your table, still knows your family by name, and the insurance you carry feels less like a financial product and more like a promise between people who know and trust each other. Your neighbourhood moves through the year with a rhythm so predictable you could set your calendar by it. Spring means every house on the block repaints their shutters and trims their hedges. Summer means sprinklers running in the evenings and the smell of charcoal grills drifting across fences. Fall means raking leaves into enormous piles that children jump into before you can bag them. Winter means shoveling driveways at dawn and helping your elderly neighbour clear their walkway, because that's simply what you do. The seasons aren't just weather patterns, they're a shared routine, a collective choreography that everyone participates in without needing to be told. Spring arrives gradually, announced first by crocuses pushing through the last patches of snow, then by the slow greening of lawns that spent winter brown and dormant. You know it's truly spring when Mr. Henderson drags his ladder out of the garage and begins scraping last year's paint from his shutters. Within days, every house on the block follows suit. Ladders appear, paint cans, line porches, and the smell of fresh paint mingles with the scent of thawing earth. You spend a Saturday morning on your own ladder, brush in hand, carefully applying new paint to shutters that have weathered through another year of sun and rain and snow. Your husband trims the hedges while you paint, his clippers making rhythmic snipping sounds, branches falling in neat piles on the grass below. The children rake winter debris from the flower beds, uncovering early bulbs already pushing toward light. By the time spring fully settles in, every house looks refreshed, tidy, ready for the warmer months ahead. Gardens are planted, lawns are fertilized, windows are washed inside and out. The neighborhood emerges from winter's hibernation looking cared for, loved, maintained by people who take pride in where they live. Summer transforms the street. Sprinklers come out in early evening, their rhythmic ticking and the spray of water creating a soundtrack that defines the season. Children run through them in bathing suits, shrieking with delight when the cold water hits their sun-warmed skin. Lawns stay green because everyone waters, everyone mows, everyone maintains the carpet of grass that connects house to house in an unbroken stretch of suburban green. The smell of charcoal smoke drifts across fences every evening as families fire up their grills. Hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken, sometimes steaks on special occasions. You cook outside because it keeps the house cool, because it tastes better, because everyone else is doing it, and the collective aroma of grilled meat makes the whole neighborhood smell like summer. Fall arrives with colour and work. The trees lining the street, maples mostly, turn brilliant shades of red and orange and gold. The leaves fall in waves, covering lawns and sidewalks and streets in a crunchy carpet that needs constant attention. Every weekend, families rake, the sound of metal tines scraping across grass creating a neighborhood-wide symphony of autumn labor. The children can't resist the piles. You rake leaves into enormous mounds, carefully, methodically, and before you can bag them, your children launch themselves into the pile, scattering leaves everywhere, laughing with the pure joy of destruction. You pretend to be annoyed, but secretly enjoy watching them, knowing these moments, these simple pleasures, are what they'll remember about childhood. By late fall, the leaves are finally bagged, the gardens are cut back, the outdoor furniture is stored away. The street looks bare, stripped down, ready for winter's arrival. Winter brings snow, sometimes a little, sometimes a lot, and with it the ritual of shoveling. You wake to find the street transformed, every surface covered in white, the world muffled and clean and beautiful. Before you've finished your coffee, your husband is outside with a shovel, clearing the driveway, then the sidewalk in front of your house, then the sidewalk in front of Mrs. Henderson's house, because she's elderly and shouldn't be lifting heavy snow. Other neighbours do the same, moving down the block with their shovels, clearing paths, helping each other, working together without discussion or coordination. By mid-morning, the entire street is passable. Driveways cleared, sidewalks shovelled, everyone having done their part to keep the neighbourhood functioning. These seasonal rhythms create continuity, a sense that time is moving but also staying the same, that the world changes but also repeats, that you're part of something larger than yourself. When you paint your shutters in spring, you're doing what every family on the block is doing, what they did last year and will do next year. When you rake leaves in fall, you're participating in a ritual as old as your neighbourhood, as predictable as the turning of the earth. And this predictability, this shared routine, creates a kind of comfort that's hard to find anywhere else. You walk into the Five and Dime on Main Street, and the wooden floors creak beneath your shoes in a way that feels permanent, like the building itself is settling into its own history. The aisles are narrow, packed with items organised in a way only the owner understands. You can buy thread, buttons, a hammer, a hairnet, birthday candles, a tin bucket, and a bag of penny candy all in one trip. The prices are shockingly low, 10 cents for this, a quarter for that, and the woman behind the counter knows most of her customers by name. She wraps your purchases in brown paper, ties them with string, and sends you on your way with a smile. The store smells like a combination of things: floor wax, paper, rubber, candy, the particular staleness of merchandise that's been sitting on shelves for months, waiting for the right person to need it. It's not an unpleasant smell, just distinctive, the kind that would let you identify this place blindfolded. The aisles stretch back from the front counter in parallel rows, each one crammed with different categories of goods. The first aisle holds sewing supplies, spools of thread in every colour, cards of buttons, packets of needles, scissors in various sizes, measuring tape, thimbles, rickrack trim. You could spend an hour in this aisle alone, sorting through options, matching colours, planning projects. The next aisle is kitchen goods, wooden spoons, spatulas, measuring cups, can openers, strainers, dish towels printed with cheerful patterns. Everything is practical, sturdy, designed to last for years. Nothing is fancy or decorative. These are tools meant for daily use, for women who cook 3 meals a day and need equipment that won't fail them. Farther back, you find hardware. Nails sold by the pound from bins, screws in glass jars, hammers and screwdrivers hanging from pegboards, small cans of paint, paint brushes, sandpaper, picture hooks, doorknobs, cabinet pulls. Mr. Kowalski shops here frequently, digging through bins to find exactly the right size nail for whatever project he's working on. The toy section takes up one narrow aisle near the back. Yo-yos, jacks, jump ropes, small plastic figurines, colouring books, crayons, modelling clay. Nothing expensive or elaborate, just simple toys that keep children entertained without requiring batteries or complicated instructions. Your children love coming here, spending their allowance carefully, weighing the relative merits of a new jump rope versus a bag of marbles. The woman behind the counter is Mrs. Novak, and she's owned this store for as long as anyone can remember. She's a small woman, compact and efficient, with glasses that hang from a beaded chain around her neck. She knows what's in stock, where everything is located, and exactly how much it cost without needing to check a list. Her memory is extraordinary, a necessity when you're running a store with thousands of small items and no computerized inventory system. You bring your selections to the counter, thread to match the dress you're hemming, birthday candles for your daughter's cake next week, a new dish towel because the old ones are wearing thin. Mrs. Novak rings them up on the cash register, an old mechanical model that dings satisfyingly when she pulls the handle. She announces the total, 35 cents. You hand her 2 quarters and she gives you change, counting it back into your palm with practiced accuracy. She wraps everything in brown paper, folding the edges precisely, securing the package with white string she pulls from a large spool mounted under the counter. She ties it with a quick motion that's become automatic after years of repetition, then hands you the package with a genuine smile. "Thank you, dear. You take care now." The 5 and dime serves a purpose beyond just selling goods. It's a gathering place, a spot where neighbours run into each other while shopping, where you learn news about the community, where Mrs. Novak keeps track of births, deaths, marriages, illnesses, all the events that shape the neighbourhood's life. She asks about your children, remembers that your son was sick last month, wants to know if he's feeling better. This personal attention makes shopping here feel less like a transaction and more like a visit with a friend. As you leave, package tucked under your arm, you pass Mr. Chen coming in, probably looking for something to fix a broken fence. You exchange greetings, hold the door for him, step out into the afternoon sunshine. The 5 and dime will still be here next week when you need something else. Still run by Mrs. Novak, still smelling like floor wax and possibility, still offering everything you need at prices that make you wonder how she stays in business. But she does, year after year, because places like this, places that know you by name and wrap your purchases in brown paper, are worth preserving, worth supporting, worth walking past the larger stores downtown to visit. Sunday evening means a potluck dinner in the church basement, and nearly everyone from your street will be there. Long folding tables are covered with checkered tablecloths, and the food arrives in waves. Casseroles still warm from the oven, platters of fried chicken, bowls of potato salad, pies with lattice crusts that someone woke up early to bake. This isn't a religious service, though. There's usually a short prayer before the meal. This is community, pure and simple. People sit elbow to elbow, children run between the tables, and conversations flow easily because everyone here knows each other, not just by name, but by history. You arrive carrying your contribution, a green bean casserole made from your mother's recipe, the dish still hot beneath the dish towels you've wrapped around it. Your husband carries a folding chair under each arm. Your children trail behind, holding a pie your daughter helped bake this afternoon. The church basement is already filling with people, the air warm and slightly humid, smelling like coffee and fried food and the particular mustiness that all church basements seem to share. The tables form long rows down the centre of the room, and they're already starting to fill with food. Casseroles crowd together in the middle, each one slightly different but recognisable. Tuna noodle, chicken and rice, beef and vegetables, all variations on themes that have been passed down through generations. Platters of fried chicken sit beside bowls of mashed potatoes. Jello salads shimmer in their moulds, suspended fruit visible through translucent red and green layers. Baskets of rolls, still warm, release steam when you pull back the cloth covering them. You find a spot for your green bean casserole, wedging it between someone's potato salad and a dish of baked beans. The dessert table is already laden with pies, apple, cherry, pumpkin, pecan, each one more beautiful than the last. Your daughter's contribution, a slightly lopsided but earnestly made cherry pie, finds its place among them, and she beams with pride at seeing it displayed alongside the work of more experienced bakers. People keep arriving, the basement filling with neighbours, friends, families from across the congregation. The children immediately abandon their parents, forming packs that will roam the basement all evening, playing games in the corners, stealing cookies from the dessert table when they think no one is looking, creating the kind of controlled chaos that adults have learned to expect and tolerate. Father Murphy calls for attention, waits for the room to quiet, then offers a brief blessing. It's simple, sincere, thanking God for the food and the fellowship, and asking for continued health and prosperity for all gathered. Everyone murmurs Amen, and then the serving begins. The line forms naturally, orderly but not rigid. Children go first, guided by their mothers, plates filled with small portions of everything they claim to like and will probably not finish. Adults follow, making their way down the table, serving spoons passing from hand to hand, everyone commenting on how good everything looks, how much work must have gone into that pie, how they've been looking forward to this all week. You fill your plate with samples of everything: a spoonful of Mrs. Henderson's potato salad, a piece of fried chicken from a platter someone brought, a helping of casserole that isn't your own, a roll with butter. You find a seat at one of the tables, squeeze in between neighbours, and the conversation starts before you've taken your first bite. The talk flows naturally, jumping from topic to topic without structure or agenda. Someone mentions the new family moving onto Maple Street. Someone else talks about the trouble they're having with their car. A third person asks for advice about a leaky roof. Recipes are shared, children are discussed, plans are made for helping a neighbour who's recovering from surgery. This is how community gets built. Not through formal meetings or committees, but through these casual conversations over shared meals, through the accumulation of small exchanges that create bonds stronger than any constitution or bylaws ever could. The children reappear when dessert is announced, materialized from wherever they've been playing, suddenly very interested in adult society now that pie is involved. They line up again, plates now destined for slices of pie, topped with ice cream someone brought in an insulated cooler. You stay longer than you planned, because that's what always happens at these gatherings. Time stretches in church basements, becomes elastic, less urgent. No one is in a hurry to leave. The coffee stays hot, the conversations stay warm, and the sense of belonging, of being part of something larger than your individual family, settles over everything like a comfortable blanket. By the time you finally gather your empty casserole dish and your children and head home, you feel fuller than the meal alone would explain. You feel connected, woven into the fabric of this community through the simple act of sharing food and time and space. And next Sunday you'll do it again, because this is what holds neighbourhoods together, not just proximity or circumstance, but these deliberate acts of gathering, of breaking bread together, of building community one potluck dinner at a time. Once a week, a bus painted cheerful colours pulls up to the corner of your street and children come running. It's the bookmobile, a mobile library that brings books directly to neighbourhoods that are too far from the main branch downtown. Inside, the shelves are lined with stories, adventures, mysteries, biographies, everything a young reader could want. The librarian who drives the bookmobile knows which kids love westerns, which ones prefer fairy tales, and which ones will read anything as long as it has animals. She makes recommendations, stamps checkout cards, and hands out bookmarks with gentle reminders about due dates. The bookmobile announces its arrival with a gentle double honk, not loud enough to be obnoxious, just enough to let the neighbourhood know it's here. The sound carries down the street, through open windows into backyards where children are playing. Within minutes they appear, running from all directions, some clutching books they're returning, others empty-handed but eager, all of them excited in a way that only free access to books can inspire. The bus itself is painted white with blue lettering that reads Public Library in cheerful capitals along the side. It's smaller than a regular school bus, customised specifically for this purpose, with shelves lining both walls inside and a small desk near the front where the librarian sits. The entrance is in the middle, 3 steps leading up into what feels like a secret world made entirely of books. Miss Anderson is the librarian, and she's been driving this route for 5 years. She's young, probably not much older than 30, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and glasses that slide down her nose when she's looking at checkout cards. She has a gift for remembering readers, for connecting children with books they didn't know they wanted, for nurturing a love of reading through careful recommendation and genuine enthusiasm. You watch from the porch as your children join the small crowd gathering round the bookmobile. Your son is clutching last week's selections, a western about cowboys and cattle drives that he read in 2 days, and a book about Abraham Lincoln that he's still working through. Your daughter has already finished both of hers and has been asking every day when the bookmobile would return. Miss Anderson opens the door and descends the steps, greeting children by name, asking about the books they're returning, expressing genuine interest in what they thought. She takes their returned books, checks them off in her ledger, then gestures toward the open door. 2 at a time, she calls. We can't all fit at once. The children take turns climbing the steps into the bookmobile's interior. Inside, the shelves are organised by age and category. Picture books for the youngest readers, chapter books for those ready for more complex stories, young adult novels for teenagers, non-fiction sections covering everything from history to science to crafts. Each shelf is carefully curated, rotated every few weeks to keep the selection fresh, to ensure that regular patrons always find something new. Your son emerges 10 minutes later with 2 new books, another western, and something about naval battles from the Revolutionary War. He's grinning, pleased with his selections, already reading the back cover of the western as he walks. Your daughter takes longer, always does, because she wants to look at everything, wants to consider all her options before committing to just 2 books, the maximum allowed per visit. Miss Anderson helps her, pulling books from shelves, making suggestions based on what she knows about your daughter's tastes. She remembers that your daughter loved the horse story she checked out 3 weeks ago, suggests a similar book about a girl and her pony. Your daughter takes it, then selects a mystery about a hidden treasure, and finally descends the steps clutching her choices like precious cargo. The bookmobile serves families who don't have cars, who can't easily get to the library downtown, who depend on this weekly visit for access to books. It serves neighbourhoods like yours where walking distance matters, where convenience determines whether children read regularly or not. Miss Anderson understands this, takes her role seriously, treats each visit like the important event it is for these children. Before she leaves, she hands out bookmarks to the children still gathered around. They're printed with reading tips, due dates, and a cheerful reminder: books are adventures waiting to happen. The children accept them solemnly, tuck them into their new books, wave as Miss Anderson climbs back into the driver's seat. The bookmobile pulls away from the curb with another gentle honk, heading to its next stop 3 blocks over, then to another neighbourhood after that. It will make a dozen stops today, bringing books to hundreds of children, creating readers, nurturing imaginations, proving that libraries don't need grand buildings to change lives. They just need someone like Miss Anderson, who believes books matter enough to drive them directly to the children who need them most. Sometimes, for no particular reason other than the weather being nice and someone having a good idea, Your street throws a block party. Tables are dragged into the middle of the road, which is closed off with sawhorses someone borrowed from the city works department. Grills are set up, music plays from someone's record player perched on a windowsill, and children dart between adults who are laughing, eating, and catching up on the week's news. There's no formal invitation, no RSVP list. The party happens because enough people decided it should, and that's reason enough. It starts casually, almost accidentally. Saturday morning, Mrs. Henderson mentions to your husband that the weather is supposed to be perfect all weekend. Your husband mentions it to Mr. Chen during their conversation over the fence. Mr. Chen suggests to his wife that maybe the street should do something, have a get-together. His wife mentions it to Dorothy, who mentions it to you, and by noon the decision has been made, block party tonight. The organisation happens organically. You don't need committees or planning sessions. Everyone just knows what to do because they've done it before. Not often, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, but enough that the routine is familiar. Mr. Henderson walks down to the city works yard and borrows sawhorses. Your husband and Mr. Chen drag their grills out to the street. Someone else sets up tables, folding models that spend most of their lives in basements, waiting for moments like this. By late afternoon, the street is transformed. The sawhorses block traffic at both ends, not that there's much traffic to block since everyone who lives here is already home, and everyone else can find another route. Tables line both sides of the road, leaving room in the middle for children to play. Grills smoke at intervals, tended by men who take their grilling responsibilities seriously, discussing techniques and temperature and the correct way to flip a burger. Food appears as families bring out whatever they have. Hot dogs, hamburgers, chicken, potato salad, coleslaw, chips, watermelon, cookies, brownies. No one coordinates this, no one assigns dishes, but somehow there's always enough of everything. You contribute a platter of deviled eggs and the potato salad you made this morning, setting them on the table alongside a dozen other offerings. Music drifts from Mr. Peterson's house, where he's positioned his record player in the open window, an extension cord snaking across his lawn to reach. He plays big band music, Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman, music everyone knows and no one objects to. Some of the younger families would prefer something more modern, but the older folks appreciate the familiar tunes, and everyone compromises without discussion. Children immediately claim the middle of the street for games, jump rope, hopscotch, tag, races from one sahuares to the other, their voices loud and joyful, their energy seemingly endless. The adults settle into conversations, clusters forming and dissolving and reforming, people drifting from group to group, catching up with neighbours they see regularly but rarely talk to at length. You find yourself in a circle of women discussing the usual topics: children, husbands, summer plans, the heat, the new family moving in next month. The conversation is easy, comfortable, punctuated by laughter and the occasional call to children who are getting too wild. Nearby, your husband stands with a group of men around the grill, beer bottles in hand, talking about cars and baseball and the condition of their lawns. As evening settles in, someone brings out a cake, birthday cake for the Miller boy who turned 8 this week. Everyone sings happy birthday while he stands embarrassed and pleased, and then the cake is cut and distributed, paper plates passed from hand to hand until everyone has a slice. The party continues past dark, the street lit by porch lights, and the glow from windows and the occasional flashlight in the hands of children who refuse to stop playing just because the sun went down. Eventually, gradually, people begin to drift home, carrying empty dishes, calling for children who appear reluctantly from wherever they've been hiding, thanking hosts who weren't really hosts, just neighbours who participated in something everyone created together. You help clean up, carrying tables back to basements, folding chairs, collecting stray paper plates and cups. Mr. Henderson returns the sawhorses to the city yard. The grills are pushed back into garages. The record player is silenced. Within an hour, the street looks normal again, empty and quiet as if the party never happened. But it did happen, and the memory of it lingers, strengthens the bonds between neighbours, reminds everyone that community isn't just about living near each other, it's about occasionally coming together, celebrating nothing in particular, simply enjoying each other's company for no reason other than the weather is nice and life is short, and sometimes the best parties are the ones that aren't planned at all. Every month, the Boy Scouts knock on your door asking for old newspapers, magazines and cardboard boxes. They're raising money for camp or new uniforms, or maybe just learning the value of hard work and community service. You hand over your stack of newspapers, tied with twine the way your father taught you, and the boys load them into a wagon or the back of a truck. They're polite, earnest, proud of the work they're doing, and you can see in their faces the same determination their fathers probably had at that age. The knock comes on Saturday morning, always the second Saturday of the month, regular as clockwork. You've been saving papers all month, stacking them neatly in the garage, folding them so they stay compact, keeping them dry because wet newspaper is heavy and useless. Your stack has grown substantial, a month's worth of daily papers plus the Sunday editions with their thick magazine sections and coloured comics. Two boys stand on your porch wearing their scout uniforms, khaki shirts with merit badges sewn on the sleeves, neckerchiefs knotted at their throats, caps sitting at slightly crooked angles. They're maybe 12 and 13, at that awkward age where they're not quite children anymore, but haven't figured out how to be adults yet. They stand straight, shoulders back, trying to embody the scout values they've been learning. "Good morning, ma'am," the taller one says. "We're collecting for the Boy Scout paper drive. Do you have any newspapers or magazines you'd like to donate?" You do, and you tell them to wait while you go to the garage. Your son, who's 9 and already talking about joining scouts when he's old enough, follows you out, curious, watching as you hoist the stack of papers. It's heavy, bound tightly with twine you've wrapped around 3 times and knotted securely. The boys take it from you with thanks that sound genuine, practiced but sincere. They carry it to the wagon waiting at the curb, a wooden cart with large wheels that 2 more boys are pulling. The stack gets added to a growing pile, and you can see they've already hit several houses this morning. Your son watches the process with fascination, asking questions about how it works, where the papers go, what happens to them. One of the scouts explains that they take everything to a recycling centre that weighs the load and pays by the pound. The money goes into the troop fund, helps pay for equipment and trips and all the things scouts need. This drive serves multiple purposes beyond fundraising. It teaches the boys responsibility, organisational skills, the satisfaction of completing a task that requires coordination and effort. It teaches them to interact with adults politely, to ask for help, to say thank you genuinely. And it serves the neighbourhood by providing a convenient way to dispose of accumulated paper, back in an era when recycling isn't automatic or mandatory, when most people would otherwise just throw everything away. The scouts work their way down the street systematically, knocking on every door, greeting neighbours by name when they recognise them, introducing themselves politely when they don't. Most families have saved papers for them, have heard the announcement at last week's church service, or seen the flyer that appeared in mailboxes. The wagon fills gradually, gets heavier, requires more effort to pull. By noon they've covered your entire street and moved on to the next block. They'll spend most of the day doing this, visiting hundreds of houses, collecting tons of paper, literally tons. By evening they'll be tired, dirty, proud of what they've accomplished. Their scoutmaster will help them unload at the recycling centre, will accept the payment and carefully record it in the troop's financial ledger, will remind the boys that this money represents their hard work and the community's generosity. Your son watches the wagon disappear around the corner, and announces that he definitely wants to join Scouts when he's old enough. You smile, remembering his father saying the same thing at that age. Remembering the lessons Scouting taught about service and persistence and showing up, even when the work is hard. These monthly paper drives are training exercises disguised as fundraisers, teaching boys to work together, to complete tasks they start to serve their community while building character one stack of newspapers at a time. The barbershop on the corner is more than a place to get a haircut. It's a gathering spot, a confessional, a news hub. The barber stands behind his chair with scissors and comb, working methodically while his customer talks. Sometimes about nothing, sometimes about everything. Other men sit in the waiting chairs, reading the paper, commenting on sports, politics, the weather. The conversations loop and overlap, and by the time you leave, you know more about your neighbourhood than you did when you walked in, even if you only came for a trim. Your husband goes every other Saturday, regular as clockwork, always at 10 in the morning. You know this because it's become part of the rhythm of your week, predictable as church on Sunday or laundry on Monday. He walks the 3 blocks to the corner where the red and white striped pole spins endlessly outside Frank's barbershop, announcing its presence to anyone who might need a trim. The shop occupies a narrow storefront between the pharmacy and the shoe repair, a single room with 2 barber chairs, though Frank works alone most days. The chairs are vintage, heavy porcelain and chrome, the kind that pump up and down with a foot pedal, that tilt back for a proper shave, that have held thousands of men over the decades they've stood in this spot. Frank himself is probably 60, though he might be older. His own hair is grey and thinning, cut close to his head in the practical style of a man who understands his own limitations. He wears a white barber's coat, always clean, always pressed, with his name embroidered over the pocket in red thread. His hands are steady despite his age, fingers trained through decades of repetition, capable of cutting hair with his eyes closed if necessary. When your husband walks in, Frank looks up from the customer he's working on, nods in recognition. "Be with you in a minute, George," he says, and your husband settles into one of the waiting chairs that line the opposite wall. He picks up a magazine from the stack on the side table, something about cars or hunting, and pretends to read while actually listening to the conversation happening in the barber chair. The man getting his hair cut is Mr. Rossi from 3 streets over. He's talking about his daughter's wedding, the expense of it, the complications of merging 2 families, the concern that his future son-in-law doesn't have enough ambition. Frank makes sympathetic noises while he works, snipping carefully around Rossi's ears, offering the kind of generic wisdom that sounds profound in the moment, but doesn't actually commit him to any particular position. Another man sits in the chair next to your husband, someone your husband doesn't know well but recognizes from church. They nod to each other, and the man comments on the weather, which leads to a discussion about whether this heat will break before next week, whether the farmers need rain, whether anyone's planning to escape to the lake for a few days. By the time Frank finishes with Mr. Rossi and calls your husband to the chair, the conversation has moved through 6 topics: the wedding, the weather, the new stoplight being installed downtown, the high school football team's chances next season, the rumour that the old bakery might close, someone's son who enlisted in the army last week. Your husband settles into the chair, and Frank drapes the cape around him, snapping it closed at the back of his neck. "The usual?" Frank asks, and your husband confirms. The usual means a trim, not too short, squared off at the back, neat around the ears. Frank's done it 100 times, knows exactly what your husband wants without needing detailed instructions. While Frank works, your husband joins the conversation. He mentions the stoplight downtown, says he nearly got hit by someone running the intersection last week, wonders aloud if the new light will help or just slow traffic. Down. The other men offer opinions. Someone knows someone who works in city planning, says the light was mandated by the state after too many accidents. Someone else complains about government overreach, says the intersection was fine for 30 years without a light. The conversation continues, flowing naturally from topic to topic. Frank knows everyone's business, or at least he knows enough to ask the right questions. He asks your husband about your son's progress in school, remembering from a conversation months ago that the boy was struggling with reading. Your husband reports that things are better, that a tutor has helped, that the teacher says he's catching up. Sports comes up inevitably. Someone mentions the Yankees, and that triggers a debate about whether this is their year, whether the pitching will hold up, whether anyone can beat them. Opinions are offered forcefully, defended with questionable statistics, rejected with equal confidence. No one actually knows what will happen, but everyone has a theory, and the pleasure is in the arguing, not in being right. By the time Frank finishes, brushing loose hair from your husband's neck and removing the cape with a flourish, 30 minutes have passed. Your husband stands, stretches, pays Frank the standard rate plus a modest tip. He feels lighter somehow, not just because his hair is shorter, but because he's been part of something, connected to his community in a way that doesn't happen automatically anymore, a way that requires showing up, sitting down and participating in the ancient ritual of men gathering to talk about everything and nothing while someone makes them presentable. Winter means the coal man comes by, backing his truck up to your basement window and shoveling black lumps of coal down a chute that leads directly to your furnace room. The coal arrives with a rumble and a cloud of dust, and for a few minutes the whole house smells like soot and industry. Your father will spend the winter feeding the furnace, shoveling coal into the firebox every few hours to keep the house warm, adjusting dampers and vents, learning the rhythm of heat and flame. You hear the truck before you see it, the distinctive rattle of its diesel engine mixed with the clank of metal shovels and the shifting weight of coal in the bed. It's early morning, still cold, your breath visible in the air when you look out the kitchen window. The coal man waves as he backs the truck up to your house, manoeuvring carefully until the rear bumper nearly touches the basement window. He's done this route for years, knows every house that still uses coal heat, knows exactly where to position his truck at each stop. Most houses are converting to oil or gas, modern systems that don't require constant attention, but your family hasn't made the switch yet. Maybe next year, your father keeps saying, but for now, coal is what keeps you warm through winter. The coal man climbs out of his truck wearing coveralls that were probably blue once, but are now permanently stained black with coal dust. His face is weathered, lined deeply from years of working outdoors in all weather, and his hands are rough, calloused, strong from decades of shoveling. He nods to your mother, who's opened the back door to acknowledge his arrival, then sets to work without ceremony. He opens the basement window from outside, removes the screen, and positions a metal chute that leads down into the coal bin in your basement. The chute is hinged, adjustable, designed specifically for this purpose. Once it's in place, he climbs up onto the truck bed and begins shoveling. The coal tumbles down the chute with a sound like distant thunder, black chunks ranging from the size of a fist to the size of a baseball, clattering against metal before landing in a growing pile in the basement. Dust rises with each shovelful black powder that hangs in the air, drifts through the open window, makes everything smell like the earth and industry and the particular sharpness of anthracite coal. Your mother closes the kitchen door to keep the dust from spreading through the house, but it seeps in anyway, finds its way through cracks and vents, settles on windowsills and countertops, requires extra cleaning that she'll do after the delivery is finished. This is simply part of living with coal heat, the trade-off you accept for warmth. The delivery takes maybe 20 minutes. The coal man shovels steadily, rhythmically, working through the load with the efficiency of someone who's done this 10,000 times. When he finishes, he climbs down, removes the chute, replaces the window screen, and brushes coal dust from his coveralls, though it doesn't make much difference. Your mother pays him from the household money, bills counted out carefully, and he tips his cap before climbing back into his truck. He'll make a dozen more deliveries today, backing up to basement windows all over the neighbourhood, filling coal bins that will need refilling again in a month or 6 weeks, depending on how cold the winter gets. After he leaves, your father descends into the basement to inspect the delivery, to make sure the coal is good quality, that there's not too much slate mixed in, that the pile will last as long as it should. He's the one who tends the furnace, the one who wakes in the night when the house grows cold, who goes down to the basement in his robe and slippers to shovel more coal into the firebox, who adjusts the dampers to control the burn, who has learned through experience how to keep a coal fire going steadily without letting it get too hot or die out completely. It's hard work, constant work, the kind that makes you appreciate warmth in a way that people with automatic heating systems never quite understand. Every degree of heat in your house has been earned through labour, through attention, through your father's willingness to wake at 2 a.m. and feed the furnace so his family doesn't freeze. By evening, the coal dust has settled. Your mother has wiped down the surfaces, aired out the kitchen, tried to push the smell out through open windows despite the cold. The new load of coal sits in the basement, a black mountain waiting to be transformed through fire into the warmth that will carry your family through another month of winter. And in a few years, when your family finally converts to oil heat, when the coal man stops coming and the furnace gets replaced with something automatic, something that doesn't require constant attention, your father will admit that he's relieved but also a little nostalgic for the old system, for the ritual of tending the fire, for the satisfaction of keeping his family warm through his own effort, one shovelful of coal at a time. There's a woman 3 houses down who can fix anything made of fabric. Torn trousers, loose hems, buttons that need replacing, dresses that need taking in or letting out, she handles it all at her dining room table with a sewing machine that hums like a contented cat. She doesn't advertise her services. She doesn't need to. Everyone knows where to go when something needs mending, and they arrive with items bundled in their arms and gratitude already forming on their lips. She charges very little, sometimes nothing at all, because for her sewing isn't just work. It's how she stays connected. Mrs. Kowalski, though everyone calls her Helen, lives in the blue house with the white trim and the rose bushes that bloom spectacularly each June. Her husband works at the factory. Her children are grown and moved away, and her days are quieter now than they used to be. The sewing fills the silence, gives her purpose, keeps her hands busy and her mind occupied. Her dining room has been converted into a sewing room, the table pushed against the wall to make room for her machine, a singer that's older than most of the children on the block, but runs as smoothly as the day it was purchased. Spools of thread line the windowsill, organised by colour, ranging from white through every shade imaginable to black. A pin cushion shaped like a tomato sits beside the machine, bristling with pins and needles. Scissors of various sizes hang from hooks, each one sharp and specific to its purpose. You knock on her door carrying your son's trousers, the ones he tore climbing the fence last week. A long rip along the seam that you could probably fix yourself, but know she'll do better. Helen answers wearing her house dress and slippers, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, and she smiles when she sees what you're carrying. Come in, she says, stepping aside to let you enter. She leads you to the sewing room, takes the trousers from you, and examines the damage with the practiced eye of someone who's seen every kind of tear, every type of fabric failure. This is easy, she announces. I can have it done by tomorrow. You offer to pay her, but she waves the suggestion away. It's nothing, she insists. It'll take me 10 minutes. But you know you'll find a way to repay her anyway. Maybe with some vegetables from your garden next summer. Maybe with an invitation to Sunday dinner. maybe just with your continued patronage and the knowledge that you're helping keep her busy. The walls of her sewing room are lined with projects in various stages of completion. A dress for someone's daughter hangs on a dress form, pins marking where it needs to be taken in. A stack of men's shirts waits to have buttons replaced. A quilt is spread across the ironing board, squares of fabric arranged in a pattern that will eventually become something beautiful and warm. Helen doesn't just mend clothes. She alters them, updates them, transforms them. She takes dresses that are too long and makes them fashionable again. She lets out waistbands for men who've gained weight and won't admit they need new trousers. She shortens sleeves, replaces zippers, adds patches to children's jeans in patterns that make the repair look intentional, even decorative. She also sews for people who can't afford to buy new clothes, who depend on her ability to extend the life of garments that should probably be retired. She doesn't judge the state of what people bring her, doesn't comment on how worn something is or how many times it's been repaired before. She simply does what she can, working small miracles with needle and thread, making do, making things last. Her sewing machine hums throughout the day, a sound that's become part of the neighbourhood's background music. If you walk past her house mid-morning, you'll hear it through the open window, steady and rhythmic, accompanied sometimes by the radio playing softly, big band music or news or the soap operas she listens to while she works. She teaches too, though informally. Young women come to her with questions about sewing, about patterns, about how to fix something they have attempted and botched. She shows them patiently, demonstrating techniques, offering tips learned through decades of experience, encouraging them to try even when they're convinced they'll fail. When you return the next day to pick up your son's trousers, the repair is invisible, the seam stronger than it was before, reinforced in a way that will prevent it from tearing again in the same spot. You thank her, press $1 into her hand despite her protests, and leave feeling grateful not just for the repair, but for the existence of people like Helen. People who preserve rather than discard, who fix rather than replace, who understand that everything worth having is worth maintaining. When the day's work is done and dinner has been cleared away, people drift onto their front porches. Fathers sit on the steps with the evening paper. Mothers settle into rocking chairs with mending or knitting. Children sprawl on the porch floor, drawing with chalk or playing quiet games. Neighbours call greetings across yards, comment on the weather, share small pieces of news. The porch isn't just a part of the house, it's a stage, a meeting place, a gentle announcement that you're home, you're settled, and you're part of the life happening all around you. The transition from day to evening happens gradually. The heat loosens its grip, the sun slides lower, and the quality of light shifts from harsh to golden to something softer, more forgiving. This is when the front doors open and families spill out onto their porches, seeking relief from the heat that's been building inside all day, seeking air and space and the company of neighbours who are doing the same thing. Your husband claims his usual spot on the steps, sitting with his back against the railing, legs stretched out, newspaper folded in his lap. He's not really reading it. Not anymore. He read it this morning before work, but holding it gives his hand something to do, gives him a prop for the ritual of unwinding. You settle into the rocking chair, the one with the faded cushion that's moulded itself to your shape over years of evenings like this one. Your mending basket sits beside you, and you pull out a shirt that needs a button replaced, thread a needle, and begin working while your eyes scan the street, watching the neighbourhood settle into night. Your children are on the porch floor, involved in some game they've invented involving chalk and rocks, and rules that seem to change every few minutes. Their voices rise and fall, arguing and laughing, the sounds of children who are tired but not quite ready to admit it. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson sits in her wicker chair, knitting as always, her needles clicking in rhythm with your rocker. She looks up occasionally, nods, sometimes calls out a comment about the evening being pleasant or the breeze picking up or the Hendersons having company, their extra car parked in the driveway. 2 doors down, the Chens are on their porch. Mr. Chen reading something in Chinese, his wife shelling beans into a bowl, their children playing in the yard but staying close, staying visible. At the corner house, the Hendersons sit together on their porch swing, moving slowly back and forth, the chains creaking softly, their conversation too quiet to hear, but steady, comfortable. This is a different kind of socializing than the block parties or church suppers. This is casual, loose, requiring no effort beyond showing up. People stay on their own porches mostly, maintain their own spaces, but the collective presence creates community. You're alone but not isolated, private but not disconnected. Your neighbour, Dorothy, appears on her porch with a glass of iced tea, and you call out to her, ask how her day was. She crosses the lawn between your houses, climbs your steps, and settles on the railing, launching into a story about her youngest getting in trouble at school. Nothing serious, just boyish mischief, and you laugh and commiserate and share a similar story about your own son from last year. The conversation meanders, touching on everything and nothing. Someone mentions the heat, someone else talks about the garden, a third person brings up the new family moving in next month, wonders aloud what they'll be like, hopes they'll fit in. These aren't deep conversations, aren't designed to solve problems or make decisions, but they matter because they maintain connections, keep relationships warm, remind everyone that they're part of something larger than their individual families. As darkness deepens, the streetlights flicker on, one by one, casting pools of yellow light along the sidewalk. Moths appear, circling the lights, and bats swoop through the darkness above, hunting insects. The air cools enough that you consider going inside for a sweater but decide against it, not ready yet to give up this moment. Your children grow quieter, their game winding down, their movements slower. Soon you'll call them in for baths and bed, but not quite yet. Your husband folds his newspaper, sets it aside, stretches. Dorothy finishes her tea and says she should probably get back, her own children needing attention. One by one, families begin retreating inside. Lights come on in living rooms, screen doors close with their distinctive metallic sigh. The street grows quieter, emptier, the porches gradually abandoned as night fully settles in. You gather your mending, call your children inside, follow your husband through the door, into the warm glow of your house. But as you close the door, you glance back one more time at the street, at the empty porches, at the peaceful quiet of a neighbourhood at rest, and you feel grateful for this ritual, this daily gathering, this gentle reminder that home is not just a building but a place among other places, part of a street, part of a community, part of something that only exists because everyone participates, one evening at a time. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your blanket, think about the people who lived those mornings, who woke to the clink of milk bottles on the porch and the hum of the icebox and the sound of someone mowing their lawn down the street. They didn't think they were living in a special time. They were just living, moving through their days with routines that felt ordinary, unremarkable, sometimes even tedious. But those routines held them together. The milkman who knew their names, the neighbour who shovelled their walk, the seamstress who mended their clothes, the barber who listened, the street where children played until the lights came on and someone's mother called them home. What they had, what made those neighbourhoods work, wasn't money or convenience or technology. It was presence. It was showing up. It was the quiet agreement that we are responsible for each other, not in grand gestures, but in small ones. A wave from the porch, a casserole when someone was sick, a willingness to notice, to care, to help without keeping score. You can carry that forward, not the milk bottles or the coal furnaces or the party lines, those are gone, but the spirit underneath them, the choice to know your neighbours, to slow down enough to see what's happening around you, to offer help before it's asked for, to understand that community isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, one conversation at a time, one small kindness at a time, one moment of presence at a time. History isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a porch and a lawn and someone down the street who knows your name. And that is enough. That has always been enough. So rest now. Let the warmth of that knowledge settle over you like evening light on a quiet street. You're part of something too. You always have been. Good night.